On the show page, we can now upvote or downvote the question, mostly. In the controller, we read the direction post parameter to know which button was clicked and change the vote count. This doesn't save to the database yet, but we'll do that in a few minutes. Before we do, we have another opportunity to improve our code. The logic inside the controller to increase or decrease the vote isn't complex, but it could be simpler and more descriptive. In question, at the bottom, add a new public function called upvote. I'm going to make this return self. Inside, say this arrow votes plus plus. Then return this, just because that allows method chaining. All of the setter methods return this. Copy this, paste, and create another called downvote that will do this arrow votes minus minus. I'm not going to bother adding any PHP documentation above these because their names are already so descriptive. Upvote and downvote. I love doing this because it makes the code in our controller so nice. If the direction is up, question arrow upvote. If it's down, question arrow downvote. How beautiful is that? And when we move over to try it, we're still good. We've now added 3 custom methods to question: upvote, downvote, and getVotesString. And this touches on a somewhat controversial topic related to entities. Notice that every property in our entity has a getter and setter method. This makes the entity super flexible. You can get or set any field you want. But sometimes you might not need or even want a getter or setter method. For example, do we really want a setVotes method? Should anything in our app be able to set the vote directly to any number? Probably not. Probably we will always want to use upvote or downvote. Now, I will keep this method, but only because we're using it in question controller. In the new method, we're using it to set the fake data. But this touches on a really interesting idea. By removing any unnecessary getter or setter methods in your entity and replacing them with more descriptive methods that fit your business logic, like upvote and downvote, you can, little by little, give your entities more clarity. Upvote and downvote are very clear and descriptive. Someone calling these doesn't even need to know or care how they work internally. Some people take this to an extreme and have almost 0 getter and setter methods on their entities. Here at SymphonyCasts, we tend to be more pragmatic. We usually have getter and setter methods, but we always look for ways to be more descriptive, like upvote and downvote. Okay, let's finish this. In our controller, back down in question vote, how can we execute an update query to save the new vote count to the database? Well, no surprise, whenever we need to save something in Doctrine, we need the Entity Manager. Add another argument, Entity Manager Interface Entity Manager. Then, below, replace the DD question with Entity Manager arrow flush. Done! Seriously! Doctrine is smart enough to realize that the question object already exists in the database and make an update query instead of an insert. We don't need to worry about, is this an insert or an update, at all. Doctrine has that covered. But wait, didn't I forget the persist call? Up in the new action, we learned that to insert something, we need to get the entity manager and then call persist and flush. This time, we could have added persist, but we don't need to. Scroll back up to new. Remember, the point of persist is to make Doctrine aware of your object so that when you call flush, it knows to check that object and execute whatever query it needs to save that into the database, whether that is an insert or update query. Down in question vote, because Doctrine was used to query for this question object, it's already aware of it. When we call flush, it already knows to check the question object for changes and performs an update query. Doctrine is smart. Okay, Now that this is saving, what should our controller return? Well, usually after a form submit, we will redirect somewhere. Let's do that. How? Return this arrow redirect to route, and then pass the name of the route that we want to redirect to. Let's use app question show to redirect to the show page, and then pass any wildcard values as the second argument. Slug set to question arrow get slug. Two things about this. First, until now, we've only generated URLs from inside of Twig by using the path function. We pass these same arguments to redirect to route because internally, it generates a URL just like path does. And second, more of a question. On a high level, what is a redirect? When a server wants to redirect you to another page, how does it do that? A redirect is nothing more than a special type of response. It's a response that has a 301 or 302 status code and a location header that tells your browser where to go. Let's do some digging and find out how redirect to response does this. Hold Command or Control and click Redirect to Route to jump to that method inside of Abstract Controller. This apparently calls another method, redirect. Hold Command or Control again to jump to that. Here's the answer. This returns a redirect response object. Hold Command or Control one more time to jump into this class. Redirect response lives deep in the core of Symfony, and it extends response. Yes, this is just a special subclass of response that's really good at creating redirect responses. Let's close all of these core classes. The point is, the redirect to route method doesn't do anything magical. It simply returns a response object that's really good at redirecting. Okay, testing time. Spin over to your browser and go back to the show page. Right now, this has 10 votes. Hit upvote and 11. Do it again. 12. Then 13. Downvote 12. We got it. Like I said earlier, in a real app, when we have user authentication, we might prevent someone from voting multiple times. But we can worry about that later. Next, we have created a way to load dummy data into our database via the /question/new page. But it's pretty hacky. Let's replace this with a proper fixtures system.